She worked long hours every day, often starting before the sun even rose. The small cafe at the corner of the street was her world. It wasn't fancy, not by any measure, but it was clean and cozy, with warm lights that gave the place a little charm. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked bread filled the air every morning, a smell that comforted her even on the hardest days. She moved quickly between tables, refilling cups, taking orders, and trying to keep a smile on her face. Some days it was hard, but she had always believed that a small act of kindness could make someone's day a little brighter. Money was always tight. She rented a tiny apartment above an old bakery a few blocks away. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained heavily, and the heater worked only half the time during the freezing winters. She often skipped meals just to make sure her rent and electricity were paid on time. Life was far from easy, but she didn't complain. She had learned early on that complaining didn't fill an empty stomach or fix a leaking roof. So she worked, and she smiled, and she kept going. Most of the regular customers knew her well. They appreciated her warm demeanor and the way she remembered their orders without even writing them down. Some were kind enough to leave a little extra tip now and then, but it was never enough to change her life. She didn't mind. She liked the small interactions, the fleeting moments when someone's day felt a little better because of her. One chilly morning, a small boy came into the cafe. He looked about 8 or 9, though it was hard to tell exactly. He had dark eyes that seemed older than his age, filled with a quiet sadness. His clothes were neat but expensive looking, far too fancy for a boy who should have been playing in the mud or running around the park. He didn't speak much, only ordered a hot chocolate with a soft voice and found a corner seat where he could sit alone. The waitress noticed him immediately. There was something different about this child, something that made her heart ache without knowing why. He didn't seem to belong anywhere. She watched him quietly as she moved between tables, serving coffee and sandwiches. He didn't play with the toy, didn't call for attention, and didn't smile. He just sat there, staring at the floor, occasionally glancing around as if he were searching for someone, or maybe waiting for someone who would never come. For the first time in her life, she felt a strong pull to reach out. Normally, she would have been too busy to pay much attention, but something about the boy made her stop, made her take a moment just to watch him. She carried his hot chocolate to the table and knelt slightly so she could speak quietly to him. "Would you like some extra marshmallows?" she asked softly. He looked up at her, surprised that someone had spoken to him kindly. He nodded slightly and she smiled, putting a few more marshmallows into his cup. "Thank you," he whispered. It was almost like he hadn't used that word often, or maybe he hadn't heard it said gently before. "Of course," she said. "Would you like me to bring you a cookie too?" His eyes widened a little and he nodded again. She went back behind the counter and quickly picked out the largest chocolate chip cookie she could find. When she placed it in front of him, he hesitated for a moment, almost shyly, before taking a small bite. She watched him, noticing the tiny smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth. It was a small smile, nothing dramatic, but to her, it was like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. She went back to her work, but kept glancing at him. Every time he looked up at her, there was a flicker of curiosity, a silent question in his eyes. Over the next few days, the boy came back to the cafe at roughly the same time every morning. He always sat in the corner, quiet and reserved. Sometimes he would bring a small notebook and draw pictures, mostly of houses, trees, and the occasional dog. She would watch from a distance, occasionally offering him small treats or chatting lightly when the cafe wasn't busy. "Did you draw that?" she asked one morning, pointing at a picture of a house with a crooked chimney. He nodded, looking a little embarrassed. "Yes," he said softly. "It's very nice," she said. "You have a good eye. I like the chimney, it's very unique." He seemed pleased by her comment and even gave a small, shy smile. That smile became the highlight of her day, and she looked forward to seeing it more than anything else. As the days passed, she learned more about him in small fragments. He didn't talk about his family, didn't mention his home, and avoided questions about where he lived or where he went after the cafe. She respected his silence, understanding that some wounds and loneliness couldn't be healed overnight. She began to notice little things that didn't quite fit the image of a normal child. He wore expensive shoes that were always polished, his backpack looked new, and his clothes seemed carefully chosen, almost too perfect for a regular schoolboy. Yet despite these signs of wealth, he was lonely. That was something no money could fix, and it was what made her want to help him even more. One rainy afternoon, she saw him shivering in the corner. The cafe windows were fogged up from the cold outside, and the little boy's hands were wrapped tightly around his cup of hot chocolate. She grabbed an extra blanket from the storage room and gently draped it around his shoulders. "Here," she said softly. "This will help keep you warm." He looked at her, his eyes wide. "Thank you," he whispered. I don't usually get this." Her heart tightened. She didn't know what he meant exactly, but she understood. She had always believed that everyone deserved a little warmth, a little kindness, especially those who didn't have it at home. And right now she realized this child didn't have it anywhere else. From that day on, she made it a habit to save little things for him. A warm cookie here, a small chocolate there, sometimes even letting him choose a magazine from the counter to take back to his table. She treated him like a normal child, giving him attention without prying into the parts of his life that were clearly private. And slowly, the boy started to come out of his shell. He began talking a little more, sometimes telling her small stories about the drawings he made or the things he saw on his way to the cafe. She listened patiently, laughing at his small jokes and offering quiet encouragement whenever he showed even the smallest confidence. It was not an easy journey. Some days he would retreat into silence, staring blankly at his cup as if the world had forgotten him. On those days, she would just sit nearby, keeping him company without saying much, letting him feel her presence. She knew that sometimes just being there was enough. Despite her own struggles, she felt richer than she had ever been. The bond she was forming with the boy was unlike anything money could buy. She found herself thinking about him even after her shift ended, worrying if he had eaten, if he had someone to talk to, or if he was happy in the small moments he had. She didn't know why life had placed this lonely child in her path. Perhaps it was coincidence, or perhaps it was something more, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. A quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, she could make a difference in his life. As the evening settled over the cafe, she wiped down the counters and looked at the boy sitting quietly with his drawings. He glanced up and smiled at her, a small but genuine smile that seemed to say, "Thank you for noticing me." She smiled back, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee or cookies. It was a warmth that came from knowing she had made a small, meaningful connection in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. And she promised herself that she would continue to be there for him.
Day after day, no matter what, because in her heart.
She had learned something simple but powerful. Sometimes, the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference, and a little kindness can shine brightest in the lives of those who need it most. And in that quiet cafe, with the rain tapping against the windows, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she had already begun to change the life of a lonely child, without knowing how much he might change hers too. The days passed, and the small bond between the waitress and the boy began to grow stronger. Every morning, she looked forward to seeing him walk through the cafe door. Even before he arrived, she found herself preparing a little extra treat for him, a warm cup of cocoa or a fresh cookie. It wasn't something she could afford often, but she did it anyway. Seeing his eyes light up when he noticed the gesture made every sacrifice worth it. The boy had started to talk a little more, though still cautiously. He would tell her about small things that interested him, how the clouds looked pink in the early morning or how a stray dog had followed him on the way to the cafe. Sometimes he would point out patterns in the drawings he had made or ask her opinion on colors and shapes. The waitress listened patiently, laughing at his small jokes, encouraging him gently whenever he tried something new. One quiet afternoon, the cafe was unusually empty. The rain poured heavily outside and the streets were almost deserted. The boy sat in his usual corner, drawing intently, his little fingers smudged with pencil marks. The waitress noticed that he was unusually quiet, more focused than ever, but there was a sadness in his eyes she couldn't ignore. She brought over a small plate of cookies and a warm cup of cocoa, placing them carefully beside him. "You've been very quiet today," she said softly. He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and relief. I like drawing when it's raining," he whispered. "It makes me feel calm." She nodded, understanding completely. "I like rainy days too," she said. "They make the world feel softer, quieter. You can think better." He smiled faintly, a smile that seemed fragile yet genuine. It was the kind of smile that didn't come often, but when it did, it felt like a small miracle. She returned to the counter but kept glancing at him. She noticed the way he held the pencil, the way he paused before coloring as if every stroke mattered. There was a seriousness in him that was unusual for a child his age. Yet there was also a tenderness, a need to be seen and understood. Over the next few weeks, their mornings together became a routine. The boy would arrive and she would greet him with a warm smile. She began asking him small questions, not about his home or family, but about things he liked, favorite colors, favorite foods, small dreams he had. He answered slowly at first, but gradually his voice grew more confident. He would tell her about a new book he had glimpsed at the library, or a funny cloud shape he had seen on the way to the cafe. One morning, as the sun streamed through the cafe windows, the boy looked up at her with a serious expression. Do you have kids?" he asked, his voice hesitant. She shook her head with a small smile. "No, I don't," she said. "But I enjoy helping children." "Why do you ask?" I don't really have anyone to talk to at home," he said quietly. "I mean, there's someone, but they're always busy. I like talking to you." Her heart ached at his words. She knelt slightly to meet his gaze. "I like talking to you too," she said softly. "And I'm always here if you want someone to listen." The boy's eyes softened and he gave a small, tentative smile. From that moment, there was a noticeable change. He began trusting her more, sharing little secrets and stories he had never told anyone else. Sometimes he would show her drawings he had made at home, carefully hidden in his backpack, and she would admire them sincerely, pointing out the small details she liked. Each piece of praise seemed to give him a small spark of happiness that had been missing from his life. The waitress noticed something else too. He was not like other children in some ways. He was polite beyond his years, always thanking her, always careful not to spill or make a mess. His clothes were neat and sometimes even too clean, hinting at a life that was very different from hers. But despite the outward signs of wealth, there was a loneliness in him, a quiet longing for connection. And that loneliness drew her in, made her want to be there for him even more. One day, while she was cleaning tables, the boy asked her a question that caught her off guard. "Do you think rich people are happy?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. She paused, thinking carefully before answering. "Not always," she said gently. "Happiness doesn't come from money. It comes from people who care about you, from being with someone who understands you." He looked at her silently, as if absorbing her words. She could see the confusion in his eyes, the conflict between the world he lived in and the world he wanted. It was clear that even with all the comfort and luxury that surrounded him, he still felt something missing, something that money couldn't buy. The next few days, she made it a point to spend extra time with him whenever she could. She would sit by his table during slow hours, asking about his drawings, encouraging him to talk about his thoughts, and sometimes just listening in silence. She noticed how small gestures like offering an extra cookie or letting him choose a seat by the window made a difference. He began laughing softly at her jokes, sometimes leaning forward to show her a detail in his drawings he was proud of. Despite the warmth of their growing bond, she knew there were limits to what she could do. She could offer kindness and attention, but she couldn't change the circumstances of his life. Still, she didn't let that stop her. She focused on the moments they shared, on the small happiness she could give him each day. And slowly, those moments began to transform him. He started smiling more freely, talking more openly, and even asking questions about her life, curious about the world outside his own. One afternoon, the cafe was busier than usual. Families came in for lunch, friends met for coffee, and the chatter filled the small space. The boy seemed quieter than normal, sitting with his head slightly bowed. The waitress noticed immediately and brought him a small piece of cake she had saved from the morning batch. "Here," she said, placing it gently in front of him, "a little treat to make your day brighter." He looked up, surprised and grateful. "Thank you," he said softly. He took a small bite and then looked at her, his eyes full of something she couldn't quite name. "Trust, maybe, or relief, she said, sitting beside him for a moment. "It's okay to be sad sometimes. Everyone feels that way. But it's also okay to find little bits of happiness even on tough days." He nodded slowly, as if understanding something important for the first time. I think I like it here," he said quietly. "I like being with you," her heart warmed. She had always believed that kindness mattered, but hearing him say it out loud made her realize just how much of a difference she had made. She reached out and ruffled his hair gently, a simple gesture of care. From that day on, the bond between them grew even stronger. They laughed together, shared stories, and spent quiet moments enjoying each other's company. She taught him small life lessons, how to share, how to notice the beauty in small things, how to be patient. And in return, he reminded her of the joy that could be found even in the simplest moments, a smile, a kind word, a quiet connection. The boy's laughter became a light in her otherwise busy and challenging life. It reminded her why she had chosen this path, why she continued to work hard despite the struggles. And slowly she began to realize that she was not just helping him, he was helping her too, teaching her the value of patience, trust, and unconditional care. She never asked about his family, and he never offered much. But in the small world of the cafe, they created their own little space, a place where kindness ruled, where loneliness was eased, and where two people from very different lives could connect in a way that mattered. Even as the weeks went by, she noticed that the boy's sadness was still there sometimes, lurking beneath his polite exterior, but she also noticed that her presence made it lighter, more bearable. And that, she decided, was enough for now. She didn't need to fix everything. She only needed to be there, to listen, and to care. As she wiped down the tables at the end of another long day, she glanced at the boy sitting quietly in his corner, a small smile on his face. He looked up at her and waved, a simple gesture, yet filled with trust and warmth. She waved back, feeling a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in a long time. In those small, quiet moments, she understood something important. Sometimes, changing someone's life doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it only takes patience, kindness, and a willingness to be present. And in that understanding, both she and the boy found a little light in the otherwise ordinary rhythm of their days. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the waitress and the boy grew stronger with each visit. Their mornings together became a quiet ritual, almost like a secret world that existed just for the two of them. The cafe remained busy, with customers coming and going, but in the corner where he sat, time seemed to slow down. She watched him, noticing the small changes, the way he laughed a little more freely, how he no longer fidgeted nervously, and how he started to make small gestures of kindness toward her, like offering to carry a tray when the cafe was busy. The boy had begun to share more of his thoughts, though carefully, as if testing the waters. He would tell her about the little things he noticed on his way to the cafe, the way a stray cat stretched in the morning sun, or how the autumn leaves looked golden in the park. Sometimes he even tried to make her laugh with small jokes he had heard from friends at school. She found herself laughing more these days too, her own worries lightened by the simple presence of this child. One rainy afternoon, he showed her a new drawing. It was different from the others, more detailed, more thoughtful. It depicted a large house with tall windows, a big garden, and a small figure standing by the gate. The boy looked up at her almost shyly. "This is my house," he said softly. She nodded, careful not to ask too many questions. "It's beautiful," she said. "You captured every detail," he hesitated, then added, I don't get to spend much time there. It's quiet but also lonely." Her heart ached for him. She had known there was a loneliness he carried, but hearing him describe it so openly made it real in a way that words alone could not. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Sometimes, even in big houses, children need someone to be there. Someone who listens," she said softly. He looked at her with wide eyes, as if he was surprised to hear someone say exactly what he had been feeling. "I like it here," he whispered. "I feel safe here." Those words stayed with her long after she returned to her work. She realized that this small cafe, this simple space, had become more than a workplace. It had become a place of comfort, of trust, a place where a lonely child could find warmth in another human being. Over the next few days, the boy began to trust her even more. He would share little fragments of his life, carefully chosen. He told her about his school, the strict teachers, the small group of friends he had, and the countless rules he had to follow at home. She listened without judgment, offering small bits of encouragement. She never pressed him to reveal more than he wanted to, respecting the fragile boundaries he had set. One morning, while the cafe was relatively quiet, he asked a question that made her pause. "Do you think people can change if they want to?" He asked, his voice almost a whisper. She looked at him carefully, choosing her words. "Yes," she said finally. "People can change, but it takes time, patience, and a little bit of courage. Sometimes all it takes is one person who believes in you. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. She could see the hope flicker in his eyes, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. That small expression of hope made her heart swell. She realized that he was beginning to understand something important, that life didn't have to be lonely, that there were people who cared, even in a world that often seemed cold. The cafe had become their small haven, a place where he could express himself freely without fear. He began experimenting with more complex drawings, sometimes showing characters interacting, small stories unfolding in pencil and paper. She admired each one, offering gentle guidance, and praised his creativity. One afternoon, a busy customer left the cafe in a hurry, knocking over a cup that spilled across the floor. The boy instinctively grabbed a napkin and rushed to help clean it up. She smiled, noticing the small gesture. "See," she said softly, "you have a kind heart. Even small actions can make someone's day better." He looked at her, a mixture of pride and surprise in his expression. "I never thought about it that way," he said quietly. Days like these strengthened their connection. He was learning small life lessons, not through lectures or rules, but through quiet, shared experiences. She was teaching him about kindness, patience, and empathy. And he was teaching her about resilience, hope, and the power of small moments. Yet, despite their growing bond, there were moments when she sensed a distance, a part of his life that remained closed off. He would sometimes glance at the window, lost in thought, or stare at the door as if waiting for someone. She never asked, but her heart ached knowing that he had a world beyond the cafe that was complicated and perhaps lonely in ways she could not fully understand. One evening, as the cafe was closing, he handed her a small drawing he had made earlier. It was simple, a picture of two figures sitting at a table sharing cookies and cocoa. He looked up at her nervously. "This is us," he said softly. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, touched by the innocence and sincerity of the gesture. "It's beautiful," she said. "I will treasure it." He smiled, a small, genuine smile, and that night, as she walked home, she thought about how much he had changed her life too. He had brought warmth and joy into her days, reminding her why she had chosen to keep smiling, keep helping, and keep believing in the power of small acts of kindness. As the weeks passed, she noticed subtle signs that hinted at the boy's unusual life. Sometimes a fancy car would pull up outside the cafe, and a driver would wait patiently while he finished his visit. Other times, small, expensive gifts would appear in his bag, or he would talk about rules and restrictions that were far beyond what most children experienced. She didn't pry, but she could sense that there was a world he was part of, a world very different from her own. One afternoon, she found him staring out of the window, a faraway look in his eyes. "Do you think people with lots of money are happy?" he asked quietly. She shook her head softly. "Not always," she said. "Happiness isn't about money. It's about love, care, and trust. Even someone with everything can feel lonely if they don't have those things." He nodded slowly, as if he was thinking deeply about her words. I wish I had that," he said softly. Her heart clenched. She wanted to reach out, to reassure him that he could find it even if the rest of the world didn't give him much. "You can," she said gently. "And sometimes it starts with small things, like sharing a smile or talking to someone who cares. You don't have to be alone." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting a flicker of hope. That moment, quiet and unspoken, strengthened the bond between them even further. They didn't need grand gestures or elaborate words. Their connection was built on small, meaningful moments of understanding and care. One rainy day, the cafe was nearly empty, except for the two of them. She brought him a small blanket and placed it over his shoulders. He looked at her, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly. She smiled, ruffling his hair gently. "You're welcome. You don't have to thank me. I like being here with you." He smiled back, a smile that seemed to carry a weight lifted off his shoulders. In that moment, she realized that their relationship had grown into something extraordinary, a connection that neither wealth nor circumstance could define. She had always believed that small acts of kindness mattered, but now she understood the true impact. She had become a part of his life, someone he could trust and depend on, and in return, he had become a part of hers, teaching her the quiet power of patience, empathy, and understanding. As she closed the cafe that evening, she glanced at the boy, now packing his bag to leave. He looked up and waved, a gesture simple yet filled with genuine warmth. She waved back, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that their story was far from over, that the days ahead would bring new challenges, surprises, and moments of joy. But for now, she felt content. She had made a difference in a lonely child's life, and in doing so, she had found a sense of purpose, a reason to keep believing in the goodness of the world. And as the rain fell softly outside, she knew that their bond, quiet, tender, and steadfast, would continue to grow one small, meaningful moment at a time. It was an ordinary morning, the kind she had grown used to, with the smell of coffee and fresh bread filling the small cafe. The boy arrived as usual, his steps quiet but precise. Today, however, there was a subtle tension in the air, something she couldn't immediately place. She watched him as he took his seat in the corner, his hands tightly gripping the straps of his backpack. He looked nervous, a rare glimpse of vulnerability crossing his face. The cafe was busier than usual. People came in and out, chatting, ordering drinks, and leaving again. She moved quickly between tables, refilling coffee, serving pastries, and keeping a cheerful demeanor. But her mind kept drifting back to the boy. There was something different today, and she couldn't shake the feeling that change was coming. As she approached his table with a fresh cup of cocoa and a small plate of cookies, the boy looked up at her, his eyes wide and uncertain. Someone is coming for me," he said softly. She knelt beside him, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she said softly. "Who is coming?" He hesitated, glancing toward the door. "I don't know. But they said they would pick me up. They said I shouldn't be here alone." Her heart raced. She had sensed there was a bigger world outside the cafe that he had been a part of, but now it was becoming real. She wanted to ask questions to understand, but she knew he needed comfort, not interrogation. "It's okay," she repeated. "I'll be right here with you until then." Minutes later, the cafe door opened and a man entered. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried an air of authority and calm. The boy froze, his small body tense. She could see the fear and uncertainty in his eyes, the hesitation to leave. She understood immediately that this was no ordinary person, and something in her stomach told her that this moment would change everything. The man approached the boy, kneeling down to meet his gaze. "Hey there," he said softly. "It's time to go home." The boy didn't move. He looked at her, silently pleading. The waitress felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to tell him to stay, to ignore the world outside the cafe, but she also knew she couldn't keep him from the life he belonged to, however complicated it might be. The man looked around, noticing her presence. "Thank you for taking care of him," he said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "I can see he's been in good hands." She nodded, unsure of what to say. He's a wonderful child," she said softly. "He just needed someone to be there, to listen." The man's expression softened. "I can see that," he said, "and I'm grateful." As they prepared to leave, the boy hesitated, glancing at her once more. She offered a small smile, trying to convey reassurance and warmth. "I'll be here any time you need me," she whispered. He nodded slowly, his small hand slipping into hers for a brief moment before he turned toward the man. She watched them leave, a strange mixture of relief and sadness filling her chest. The cafe felt quieter without him, almost hollow, but she knew this moment was inevitable. The boy had a life beyond these walls, and today she had glimpsed the truth. Later that day, she couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Who was that man? Why was the boy so hesitant to leave with him? Her mind wandered through the weeks they had spent together, the small smiles, the quiet conversations, the moments of trust, and she realized how much the boy had changed her life too. The next morning, the boy returned, but there was a difference. He was quieter than usual, and the sparkle in his eyes was dimmed. She placed a warm cup of cocoa in front of him, along with a small cookie. He accepted them silently, staring at the table as if lost in thought. "Do you want to talk about yesterday?" she asked softly, kneeling beside him. He shook his head. "No, I just didn't want to leave," he said quietly. She nodded, understanding completely. "I know," she said gently. "It's okay to feel that way. Change is hard, especially when you've found a place where you feel safe." He looked up at her, his eyes searching. Will you still be here?" he asked, his voice small. She smiled, reaching out to ruffle his hair gently. "Always," she said. "I'll always be here for you." Over the next few days, the boy began opening up again, though cautiously. He told her small things about the life he had outside the cafe, about the house, the rules, the quiet corridors filled with expensive furniture but lacking warmth. He spoke carefully, as if choosing his words with great care. She listened patiently, offering comfort without judgment. One afternoon, while she was cleaning tables, the boy handed her a drawing. It was a picture of the cafe, with two figures sitting in the corner sharing cookies and cocoa. Beneath the figures, he had written a small note. "Thank you for being my friend." Her eyes welled up with tears. She looked at him and he smiled shyly. I wanted to show you," he said softly. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice choked. "Thank you for sharing it with me." That evening, as she closed the cafe, the man who had come to pick him up appeared again. This time he approached her directly. "I wanted to speak with you," he said, his tone respectful. "I've been observing how you've interacted with my son, and I want to thank you personally." She felt a surge of curiosity mixed with nervousness. "Thank you," she said softly. I just tried to be kind," he nodded. "Kindness is rare, and it's something my son needed. I can see the difference you've made in his life. He trusts you, and that is invaluable." She listened, stunned as he continued. "I also want to be honest with you. I am not an ordinary man. My son's life is very different from most children's. We have resources, wealth, and influence that many people don't. But despite all of that, he needed someone like you, someone genuine who treats him as a child, not as a responsibility or a possession." Her heart raced. She had suspected he was important, that his life was not ordinary. But hearing it confirmed was overwhelming. She struggled to find words. I didn't know," she whispered. I wanted to be there for him." "That's exactly why he trusts you," the man said softly. "Because your care is real. It's not influenced by money, status, or obligation, and for that, I am grateful." He paused for a moment, then added, "I want you to know that your kindness will not go unnoticed. I would like to offer support, anything you may need. Not as a reward, but as a recognition of the difference you've made in his life." She shook her head, overwhelmed by the sincerity of his words. I don't need anything," she said softly. I only wanted him to be happy." The man smiled, understanding. "That is enough, truly." In the days that followed, she noticed a subtle shift. The boy seemed lighter, happier, as if a burden had been lifted from his small shoulders. She continued to spend time with him, sharing cookies, stories, and laughter. But now she understood the truth. He was not just any child. He was the son of one of the wealthiest men alive, and her small acts of kindness had reached him where wealth could not. Despite the revelation, nothing about their bond changed. They continued to laugh, to draw, and to share quiet moments in the cafe. She realized that her role had always been simple: to care, to listen, and to provide a little warmth in a world that often overlooked the small, essential needs of children. And now, knowing the truth about his life, she understood something even deeper. Wealth and status could not replace genuine human connection. What mattered was presence, patience, and kindness. In the small cafe, amidst the smell of coffee and freshly baked bread, she had found a rare treasure, a connection that transcended social status, money, and circumstance. As the sun set outside, casting a golden glow through the windows, she looked at the boy, now smiling and chatting quietly as he drew. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her presence had made a real difference in his life. And in that moment, she understood that the bond they shared was a rare and beautiful thing, one that neither money nor power could ever replicate. Days passed, and life in the cafe returned to its gentle rhythm. The boy came every morning, and their bond continued to grow stronger. Even though she now knew the truth about his family, nothing had changed between them. He was still the same child who found comfort in her presence, and she was still the same woman who cared deeply for him. Their connection was built on trust, laughter, and small acts of kindness, and that was something money could never buy. The father, meanwhile, had quietly observed the relationship. He saw how the boy's face lit up when she entered the cafe, how he laughed freely and seemed lighter than he had ever been. He realized that she had given his son something he had been missing all along, a sense of normalcy, warmth, and unconditional care. That realization filled him with gratitude and admiration. One afternoon, after the cafe had emptied and the quiet of late afternoon settled in, the father approached her once more. He was calm but carried a gentle authority, the kind that commanded respect without fear. "I wanted to speak with you again," he said softly. "It is important to me that you understand how much you have changed my son's life." She shook her head, feeling a mix of shyness and surprise. I just tried to be kind," she said softly. "I didn't know I was making that much of a difference." He smiled, a warmth in his eyes that made her heart flutter. "Kindness often works in ways we don't realize," he said. "But you have done more than I could have hoped. You have given my son something I could not. A genuine friendship, a safe space, and the confidence to trust again." Her heart swelled. I'm glad," she said. "I wanted him to feel happy. That's all that mattered." He nodded, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want to offer you help," he said. "Not because I expect anything in return, but because I see the effort, the care, and the love you have given. I want to support you in your life in whatever way you need." She blinked, surprised and a little overwhelmed. I don't know what to say," she whispered. I've never been offered anything like that before." He smiled. "You don't need to say anything. Just know that your kindness is recognized. Your life can be made easier if you allow it, but only if you want it." Over the next few days, he offered assistance quietly, in ways that respected her dignity. He provided opportunities to improve her living situation, offered financial security, and even arranged for her to pursue dreams she had long postponed. Yet he never demanded anything from her. He understood that what she had given his son was priceless, and it could never be replaced with money. The boy noticed the subtle changes too. One morning, as she placed a warm cup of cocoa in front of him, he asked quietly, "Are you happy?" She looked at him, surprised by the question. "I am," she said softly. "Because I can be here with you, because I can help, and because I see you smiling." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I like it when you're happy," he said. It makes me feel safe too." Her heart ached with warmth. She realized that their bond had become something deeper than she had imagined. It wasn't just about helping him. It was about mutual trust, love, and understanding. They had created a small world in the cafe where loneliness did not exist, where laughter and kindness mattered more than anything else. One afternoon, the father asked if he could join them quietly for a few moments in the cafe. She felt nervous at first, unsure of how the boy would react. But when he saw his father, he didn't recoil or hide. Instead, he smiled, a bright, genuine smile that reached his eyes. The father knelt beside him and whispered softly, "I see why you like spending time here. I understand now." The boy looked at her and then at his father, realizing that she had bridged a gap he had never thought could be crossed. She watched silently as they shared a quiet moment, understanding that her presence had allowed a family, in some ways, to reconnect in ways money alone could not achieve. Over the next few weeks, life took on a brighter hue. She continued working at the cafe, but now there was a sense of stability and hope she had never known. The boy continued to visit daily, laughing, drawing, and sharing stories, now with a quiet confidence that came from feeling truly valued. And the father, though still busy and responsible for his enormous business empire, made small efforts to ensure his son's happiness was always a priority. One day, he approached her privately. "I want to offer something more permanent," he said. "A way to ensure that you never have to struggle alone again. Not because of me, but because you deserve it." She shook her head gently. I don't need anything like that," she said. "I'm happy with what I have. Helping your son is enough." He smiled, understanding her humility. "I know," he said, "but I insist. You have been more than kind. You have been extraordinary. You have given him a gift that money cannot buy, and I want you to have the support to live the life you deserve in your own way." Reluctantly, she accepted. The changes were subtle at first, a small improvement in her apartment, some assistance to pursue courses she had always dreamed of, and the reassurance that she could provide for herself without constant struggle. But the emotional reward was even greater. She had her own sense of security now, and yet her heart remained in the cafe with the boy, sharing laughter, stories, and warmth each day. The boy, sensing her relief, hugged her one morning, his small arms tight around her waist. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for listening, for caring, for being here." Tears filled her eyes. "I will always be here," she said softly, "no matter what." Over time, the bond they shared became a quiet legend in the small cafe. Customers noticed the way the boy's face lit up when she entered, the way they shared small moments that seemed ordinary, but were filled with extraordinary care. Friends who came in often remarked on the warmth that radiated from their interactions, and she realized that even strangers could sense the depth of genuine human connection. One rainy evening, as she closed the cafe, the boy stayed behind with her for a moment. He looked up at her with a smile that was brighter than ever. I feel happy now, he said. Not because of gifts or money, but because of you. You made me feel like I belong somewhere. Her heart swelled. And you've made me happy too, she whispered. You've taught me patience, hope, and the value of small moments. You've given me more than I could ever explain. He smiled, reaching for her hand briefly. We make each other happy, he said softly. She nodded, realizing that it was true. Their relationship had become something rare and precious. Two lives connected by kindness, trust, and genuine care. It wasn't about money, status, or circumstance. It was about humanity and the simple power of showing someone they mattered. As the seasons changed, the boy grew more confident, more joyful, and more open. He spoke freely, laughed often, and sometimes even helped other children who came to the cafe. And the waitress, though still living a humble life, found a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose she had never known. One day, the father approached her with a quiet smile. Thank you, he said, for being there when he needed you most, for showing him that the world can be kind, that people can care without expectation. You have changed his life, and for that I am forever grateful. She shook her head, smiling through tears. I didn't do it for thanks, she said. I did it because he needed someone. That's all. He nodded, understanding completely. And yet you have given all of us a gift we cannot repay. Your kindness will always be remembered, not as charity, but as genuine care, the rarest gift of all. The boy, who had been listening quietly, ran to her and hugged her once more. You're my favorite person, he whispered. She hugged him back, feeling a warmth that filled her heart completely. And you're mine, she said softly. Always. In the small cafe, amidst the smell of coffee, the warmth of baked bread, and the quiet rhythm of daily life, they had found something extraordinary. A lonely child had found friendship and care. A waitress had found purpose and fulfillment. And a father had discovered the true value of kindness beyond wealth. And in the gentle glow of the evening, they knew this bond would last far beyond the walls of the cafe, a living testament to the power of compassion, trust, and genuine human connection.